Right. So one of the problems we have, it's widely acknowledged now, is you have financial institutions that are too big to fail, then you can't let them fail because the system runs into trouble. Now, George Shultz, the former Treasury Secretary, who's now at Stanford, says if they're too big to fail, they're too big. But the current thinking at the Treasury and at the Fed is that we're kind of stuck with this, that we cannot make, there's no practical way to make the institutions small enough so they don't put the system at risk. And if we forced a lot of breakups of banks, we'd end up putting our economy at a disadvantage because we have big global companies that need big global banks, and there are other big global banks. We'd end up with a world in which we had massive Chinese and Japanese and German banks and minuscule U.S. banks, and that didn't seem to serve our interests. So I think the current thinking is there are institutions that are too big to fail, and the question is, how do we regulate and supervise them so they don't put us at such big risk, and how do we force them to pay a kind of tax for size? And they're going to not draw a circle. They're not going to say everything in this circle is too big to fail and everything on the outside is not too big to fail, because then everybody would be $2 shy of being too big to fail, and they would put the system at risk anyways. So they're going to basically try and make them hold more capital. It's kind of a tax on size, create a disadvantage to being too big in the hopes that that will, A, give them more wherewithal to absorb shocks, and B, provide fewer incentives to be too big, because there's a big advantage to being too big. If you're too big, people will lend you money because they know that if you get in trouble, the government will bail you out. And that leads people to do reckless things. And so we're now in this awkward stage of trying to put the genie back in the bottle. And I don't think they're ever going to define what too big means. But we know what it's kind of like the pornography thing. You know it when you see it. What it means is an institution that the government's afraid to let fail because the consequences will be so great to people outside that institution.